Alright guys, you wanted a video, you got a video. This is not going to be a fun video. There's not going to be any funny pictures, no messages. I'm just going to do the best that I can and get you all the answers that you need. Alright, first question that you will see on your quiz, again, will be the unit circle and will be the chart. Now, there's no trick to answering any of these questions. You just have to know your unit circle and know your chart. So, remember that the first 3 degrees that you should know are 30, 45, and 60. And you should also know the axes are 0, 360, and 90. Now the coordinates for 30 are square root of 3 over 2, 1/2, square root of 2 over 2, comma, square root of 2 over 2, and 1/2, comma, square root of 3 over 2. I know this is kind of hard to see. For 0, the coordinates are 1, 0, and for 90, the coordinates are 0, 1. This is the only section of the unit circle I will fill in for you, because everything else you should be able to fill in on your own. The point of this review is just to help you with things that you should know based on the unit circle. Alright, tangent. Remember the 3 numbers I told you to remember for tangent are square root of 3 over 3, 1, and square root of 3. Now you know that tangent is a cofunction to cotangent. So I can just take these 3 answers and rewrite them, just reversing the order. The numbers I told you to remember for cosecant were 2, square root of 2, and 2 square root of 3 over 3. Since cosecant and secant are cofunctions, all you have to do is reverse the order. So it'll be 2 square root of 3 over 3 for 30. Square root of 2 stays the same, and just simply 2. Okay, so for 0, the answers for 0 will be exactly the same as the answers for 360. So the tangent of 0 is going to be y over x. So y over x in this case would be 0 over 1, which means the tangent of 0 is 0. Also meaning that the tangent of 360 is 0. The tangent of 90 will be 1 over 0, which is undefined. If I go around the circle, the tangent at 270 would be 0 over 1. Remember, y over x. So 0 over 1 is, oops, not 270, 180. So the tangent at 180 will be 0. And then the tangent at 270 would be negative 1 over 0, which is undefined. Now remember, the answers for tangent are cofunctions to cotangent, which means it's just the opposite. So if tangent is 0, that means cotangent is undefined. If tangent is undefined, that means the cotangent is 0. And so forth. 0 here, undefined here. Undefined here, 0 here. 0 here, undefined there. Okay, now for the cosecant. Remember, cosecant is 1 over sine. So we look at our sine value at 0, and it's 0. So 1 over 0 is undefined. Now moving on to 90, our value at sine is 1, so 1 over 1 is 1. Go over to 180. 1 over 0 is undefined. Go down to 270. 1 over negative 1 is negative 1. And then back to 360, it will be the same answer as 0, which is undefined. So remember, for secant is the complete opposite of cosecant, because it's 1 over cosine. So if it's undefined here, secant will be 0. If it's 1 here, then secant will be, oops, again, it's not the complete opposite. It means that this is 1, because it's all based off of the first number. So since secant is 1 over cosine, that's 1 over 1, which is 1. Since 1 over cosine here would be 1 over 0, that's why it's undefined. 1 over negative 1 is negative 1. 1 over 0 is undefined. And 1 over 1 is 1. So there goes your whole entire chart to fill in. So now I'm just going to answer everything else based on the chart. Alright, the first one says find a positive and negative coterminal angle for the following. You should not need a calculator for this, but usually these type of questions are on the calculator section because sometimes the numbers are so big. So first thing you want to do is take 750 and add it to 360 times k. So now our k value can be anything that would give us a positive or negative coterminal angle. So if I decide to plug in negative 1, then that will just give me $390. Okay? So 390 is a positive coterminal angle. Now if I plug in negative 2, that gives me 30. That's not going to work because I need a negative 1 now. So I'm going to erase and try something else. Negative 3. And that's going to give me negative 330. Since that's a negative angle, I'm done with this question. Okay, so that's all you have to do. Alright, the next one is negative 420. So I'm going to do negative 420 plus 360 times k. Well, the k value can be anything that I want. So let's say I decide to choose 1. And this is the work I expect for you to show. That gives me negative 780. That is a negative coterminal angle, so I can move on from there. Now let's pick a different number. Let's go to 2 now. And after I plug in 2, I get 300. 300 is positive, and that's it. And I'm good. Okay, so just remember you need 1 positive, 1 negative coterminal. Looking at the first example, you see that both of my answers for k were negative. That's fine. You don't have to have 1 negative and 1 positive k value. You have to have 1 positive and 1 negative coterminal angle, period. Okay? You will be allowed to use calculator for that section. Okay, the second section is identifying the quadrant. So for a question like this, it's really good if you just draw your axis. Then just put your plus plus, negative plus, negative negative, plus negative. And then don't forget what happens on your axes. So this is your positive x, positive y, negative x, negative y. So the first one says that sine of theta is less than 0, which means it's negative, and cosine is less than 0, which means it's negative. Well, the only time that that happens is here in the third quadrant. So the answer to the first question is the third quadrant. Okay, second one says that cosecant is undefined. Well, okay, undefined does not occur in my quadrants, so it must occur somewhere on my axes. Alright, well, undefined for cosecant means that my sine value must be equal to 0. So now I have to look, where is sine going to be 0 and where is tangent going to be 0? Well, sine is 0 here because this is 1, 0. So sine is 0 here, and that means 0 over 1 is 0. So that means on the positive x-axis, sine is 0 and tangent is 0. But also, on the other side, at negative 1, 0, sine is 0 and tangent will be 0. So this has two answers. It is the positive x-axis and the negative x-axis. Or you can just say it's the whole entire x-axis. Okay, the last one says that tangent is less than 0, which means tangent is negative, and secant is greater than 0, which means secant is positive. Well, if secant is positive, that means that cosine is positive, because remember, they're related. So I need to look for a quadrant where cosine will be positive, that means my x value, and that tangent is negative. I know that tangent is negative here in the second quadrant, and I also know that it's negative here in the fourth quadrant. So now I need to look at my x values. Here, my x value is negative, so that's not going to work. So that just means here, where my x value is positive, that will work. So this is where cosine is positive and tangent is negative. So the answer to this will be the fourth quadrant. Okay, the next question says find the reference angle for the following angles. So reference angles must be between 0 and 90 degrees. So that means if your answer is not between 0 and 90, you have to make sure that it is. So what we're going to do for the first one is, first I need to get rid of this negative. So I'm going to add 360 to 150. And that gives me 210. 210 is in the third quadrant. So since it's in the third quadrant, in order to get this to be between 0 and 90, I'm going to follow the rule that says to subtract this by 180. And when I subtract that by 180, I find out that my reference angle is 30 degrees. Okay, the next example has 405. That's too big. That's more than one rotation. So I'm going to subtract that by 360 so I can get it to be within this unit circle. So that gives me 45. 45 is in the first quadrant, which means I don't have to do anything else because it's between 0 and 90. Okay? Okay, the next one says 293. 293 is in the third quadrant. So I'm going to take, well actually it's in the fourth quadrant because 293 is right here. So I'm going to do 360 minus 293 because that's the rule for the fourth quadrant. And I wind up getting 67. So 67 is in between 0 and 90. Alright, the next section is all about the unit circle. It's knowing where in the unit circle are you going to see these numbers, and it's also knowing your chart. Okay, the first one says cosine of theta equals negative square root of 3 over 2. Well, knowing my unit circle like I do, I know that I see that square root of 3 over 2 in 4 places. 30, 150, 210, and 330. Those are the 4 places in my unit circle that I see square root of 3 over 2. Now there's only 2 spots where it's going to be negative. Cosine is negative in 2 areas. It's negative here, and it's negative here. In the other sections, cosine is positive. So that means that I can eliminate this answer, and I can eliminate this answer. So that means the answer to the question is 150 degrees and 210. Okay, the next one says that cotangent is undefined. So that means that it is a axis question. Okay, so my choices for the axes would be 0, 90, 180, or 270. And then you can throw in 360 if you want. Now, cotangent is undefined means that tangent is 0. So if I just label these quickly, I can see where tangent is going to be 0, so that cotangent is undefined. Well, tangent is y over x, so tangent is 0 here, tangent is 0 here. So that means in these two spots, tangent equals 0. So that means at 0 and 180, tangent will be 0. So since tangent is 0, that means that cotangent is undefined. So the answer to this question would be 0 and 180. And I'm also going to throw in 360 since it is the twin of 0. Alright, the next one I want to look at is it says sine is negative square root of 2 over 2. So I know that sine is positive in the first quadrant and in the second quadrant. Everywhere else, sine will be negative. Now, I normally see square root of 2 over 2 here at 45, which means I'm going to see it here at 135, here at 225, and here at 315. Since I'm looking for a negative sine value, I know that I can cross out my values from the first and second quadrant, which means the answer to this question would be 225 and 315. Alright, cosecant equals 2. Well, if cosecant equals 2, that means that that's when sine equals 1/2. Okay, well, sine equals 1/2 in 4 places. It can either equal 1/2 at 30, at 150, at 210, and at 330. Again, we're looking for where sine is positive, so sine is positive in 2 places, the first and second quadrant. So I can cross out these 2 answers because they're not in the first and second quadrant. So my answer to this question will be 30 and 150. Okay, the last one talks about secant. So secant's related to cosine. So cosine is positive in 2 places, the first and the fourth quadrant. So if secant is negative 2 square root of 3 over 3, that means that cosine is negative square root of 3 over 2. Well, I only see square root of 3 over 2 in 4 places. I see it at 30, at 150, 210, and 330. Since I'm looking for a negative, I can't use the first and fourth quadrant, so I'm going to cross out these 2 answers, meaning that my answer will be 150 and 210. Alright, so if you guys really are comfortable with the unit circle, you'll be able to answer these questions. If you're not, you'll have to break it down like I do and cross things out. Since these are reciprocal functions, I know that the reciprocal of 2 is 1/2, and the reciprocal of this winds up being square root of 3 over 2. So if you didn't memorize these 2, you can always flip them over to see what their sine or cosine value will be. Okay, the last section requires you to do some drawing and get the exact values. So the first one says, and really pay close attention, it says here that quadrant 2 is where it lies, and that cosine is negative 2/5. Remember that cosine is equal to x over r. R can never be negative, so that negative 2 is going to be assigned to actually the 2. So when you write it here, it will be negative 2 over 5. Meaning that secant is 5 over negative 2. Now you need to get your values for the other 4, so we're going to use Pythagorean theorem. Pythagorean theorem for circles is x squared plus y squared equals r. I know my x value is negative 2. I don't know my y value. And I know that r is simply equal to 5. If I square both sides, then I'm left with negative 2 squared plus y squared equals 25. Negative 2 squared is equal to 4. So 4 plus y squared equals 25. Subtract 4 on both sides. Y squared is equal to 21. The y value will be equal to the square root of 21, which is just what that says, square root of 21. Now, if you want to graph the square root of 21, that's when you could look at your calculator for the value, for the approximation. That's called an approximation. So this is approximately 4.58. So when you're graphing it, you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 4.58 is somewhere in the middle. We know that our x value is negative 2. So we're going to go left 2 up to negative 4.58. And that's where our terminal side will be. Our initial side is always the x-axis. So we will draw a theta there, and we have a really, really small triangle. This value here is 5. Our x value is negative 2, and our y value is square root of 21. Now we can use that and use SOHCAHTOA to get the rest. Sine is equal to opposite over hypotenuse, so it's square root of 21 over 5. You do not have to rationalize because the square root is in the numerator. But here for cosecant, you are going to have to rationalize. Rationalizing means that you're going to multiply both the numerator and denominator by square root of 21. Meaning that your final answer is 5 square root of 21 over 21. If you were able to reduce these two, which you can't, but if you were able to, you would have to reduce. I am taking off points if you do not reduce these two. Alright, tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent, which is square root of 21 over negative 2. That can stay just like that. But for cotangent, it'll be negative 2 over the square root of 21. Again, you will have to rationalize, making your final answer negative square root of 21 over 21. So these are your answers that you had to find. Now, this is a 7-point question. 6 points for all of these answers, and then 1 point for the work. So if you mess up the work, you could really mess up everything else. So really, really watch what you're doing. Okay, make sure you label everything as well. The triangle really helps. Alright, last one. It says find the exact values of the 6 trigonometric functions of an angle. So the first thing you want to do is plot that point. So we're going to go left 5 up to 9 and make your point. From the origin, draw a line. That's called your terminal side. Your initial side is always the x-axis. Then draw a dotted line to make the triangle. Label your triangle with theta, 9, and -5. So now what we're trying to do is figure out what r is. So we have x squared plus y squared equals r. -5 squared plus 9 squared equals r. Now you can use your calculator to figure this out. And you get the square root of 106. So that's your value for r. Now you might want to see if 106 can go into any perfect squares. I don't really think that it does, because if you divide it by 2, 53 is what it is equal to, and that's a prime number. So you're not able to do any more factorization to this. So that's basically your final answer here. So your radius is going to be square root of 106, which means we're going to have a lot of rationalization going on. Okay, remember that sine is going to be opposite over hypotenuse. So it's 9 over the square root of 106. Just make sure that you rationalize. So your final answer is 9 square root of 106 over 106. Now you can see if 9 divided by 106 can reduce, and it does not, so it stays the same. The cosecant, use this to flip. Don't flip this, because that's going to be a lot of work. Flip this, because when you flip it, it's simply square root of 106 over 9, which means you don't really have any more work to do after that. Okay, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so that's -5 over the square root of 106. Rationalize again, making your final answer -5 square root of 106 over 106. Flip this. Do the reciprocal of this. And there's your answer there. Okay, tangent is opposite over adjacent, so that's 9 over -5. You don't have to do anything else there. And the cotangent would be -5 over 9. Alright, so that concludes the review. I'm just going to do a couple of quick points for you so you don't forget. Alright, here's your circle. Remember that in quadrant 1, all positive, and the order goes 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. Don't forget your tangent values, which are square root of 3 over 3, 1, and square root of 3. And don't forget your cosecant values, which are 2 square root of 2 and 2 square root of 3 over 3. Once you know these values, you can find cotangent and you can find secant. And just remember your values. Second quadrant, don't forget, cosine's negative, sine is positive. So the only thing that's positive in this quadrant is sine. The values are going to be 120, 135, and 150. And the related or reference angles are 60, 45, and 30, which means instead of going 3, 2, 1, now cosine's going to go 1, 2, 3. Quadrant 3, tangent is the only thing that's positive, the only thing. So that means when you're numbering it, the numbers in this quadrant are 210, 225, and 240, which means the reference angles are 30, 45, and 60. Meaning you're going to number again 3, 2, 1 for cosine, 1, 2, 3 for sine, but make sure everything for cosine and sine is negative. Fourth quadrant, the only thing that's going to be positive is cosine. So that means that the numbers that you use are 300, 315, and 330. The reference angles for these are 60, 45, and 30, meaning when you number on this side, cosine goes 1, 2, 3, sine goes 3, 2, 1. Cosine is the only thing that's positive. Now your axes, cosine is going to be your first value, which is 1. So cosine of 0 is 1. Sine of 0 is 0. Meaning that in this quadrant, this axis, tangent of 0 is 0. Now when you go to the other side, this is 180. Cosine of 180 is going to be negative 1. Sine of 180 is 0, meaning that tangent again on this axis is 0. So tangent is 0 on your horizontal x-axis, whether it's 0, 360, or 180. Now as for the other ones, you just do the reciprocal of these three values to get cosecant, secant, and cotangent. Finally, your y-axis is 0, 1, that's 90. That means the cosine of 90 is 0, and the sine of 90 is 1. Meaning, tangent doesn't have a value at 90, it's undefined. When we go down here to the negative y-axis, that's 270. So cosine of 270 is 0, sine of 270 is negative 1, meaning that tangent, again, is undefined. So on the y-axis, tangent is undefined. So just do the reciprocal to find the other three values. Okay, when you do a problem like this, make sure that you plot the point, draw it to create your terminal side. Initial side is always going to be on the axis. Create your triangle so you can do SOHCAHTOA and Pythagorean theorem. And last but not least, if they give you a value, what you're going to do is figure out, okay, secant, that's the opposite of cosine. So that's 4 over negative 5. That can't work, so the negative must go with the 4, because you can't have a negative radius. So that means once you figure out that it's 4 over 5, you do your Pythagorean theorem to find your value for sine. Alright, good luck everybody. I don't have anything fun or wacky for you, but I just want you to do well, and I hope that everybody watches this video. Please make sure to press pause so that you can write things down and then rewind if you want to hear it again. Okay, because I know sometimes I do talk fast. Good luck. Your quiz will be Tuesday. Monday we're moving on to the next part of our unit, which is 5-4. And I will not be here at lunch to help you, so this is independent study time. Alright, good luck, and you'll get it on Tuesday. And have fun at homecoming.